Hey Saint1050, welcome to your second pass recording. So in this session, I'm going to be teaching you how to use XSLT in your browser to be able to display XML pages, as well as how to configure it so that way it appears properly and it's easy enough to edit. So I'll just start by installing Firefox. So you would just download that from here. You can just search download Firefox. I'd recommend doing this because of the fact that it provides a second environment where you can change the settings. Like, for example, the setting we're going to be changing is privacy.file_unique_origin, which essentially gets around a security fix that they put in I believe it was a few years back now, that was designed to stop you from opening any kind of malicious files that you were sent in XML or XSLT that would be able to use, I believe that they had an iframe, or there was some other embedded malicious code that would allow it to essentially pull your private information into that file and then create a form and a post request to a malicious server. So yeah, there's quite a few attacks that opens up. So usually it's a good idea to have a second browser which isn't your default, which has all of those settings enabled, so that if you ever do open up anything malicious, it's not going to do anything. So here we go. I'll just install this. Okay, so that's just going to take a moment. Also, you'll probably notice this text I've got in the background in VS Code. You'll be provided this in your labs, but essentially all that this does is it essentially just points to XSL transform, which is just a file that sits on the W3 site. So this will provide, we'll get into it a little later, but in your XSLT, this will just provide a reference to be able to tell the XSLT how to parse it into HTML. All right. Firefox is finished. So we've got that started. Now the first thing you'll want to do, I'm just going to unpin it from here. I'll get rid of the desktop shortcut as well. We don't want that. So we're not going to be using this as our primary browser. This is just used so that we don't have to worry about any settings that we're changing. All right, so you want to head to About, then full colon, and then config, just like that, all one word. So it's already giving you a warning telling you that this can open up some vulnerabilities. I'm just going to accept that. Now we're going to search for privacy. Should be one of the other ones that comes up. And then we're going to go to file. There you go. Privacy file unique origin. That's currently true. We're going to set that to false. That we don't need to save anything. That's automatically takes effect. Essentially, all that does is it just means that next time that we open Firefox, I believe you can even leave it open. If we open up any XSLT files, they'll actually display. I'll demonstrate that a little later. So first things first, you can see I've created this new folder called XML XSLT cheat sheet, because that's exactly what we're going to be making. So we're going to be making a cheat sheet for XML and XSLT in XML and XSLT. So first off, regular XML, just going to go XML version equals 0. You've probably seen all of this before. And then we're going to go I apologize in advance if any of this is incorrect. It has been a little while since I've done it. So we'll put in inline doc type, just like that. And we're going to store a bunch of XML tags in here. So we're going to call this tags, and then we'll put our DTD in underneath that. So first thing is first, we need to declare an element named tags. And that's going to contain tag, and we want to have at least one and as many as we want. So that's going to be plus. Close that. Next, we're then going to want another element, which will be tag. And that's going to have a name, it'll have a description, we want one of each and exactly one. And then we'll also put in some code context. Why not? And we'll make that optional with a question mark. So it's either one or none. Right, so next thing down, we need to declare name as PC data. So that's going to be passable characters, and then similarly for description and code context. So just like this, so description and code context. Brilliant. That should be all of our DTD done for this. We'll add another link up here in a minute, but for now, we'll start by declaring tags as our root. Then we want tag inside of tags. And for this first tag, we're going to declare the same tag that we're going to be using, which is going to be XSL/stylesheet. Now, because we're going to be writing less than symbol and then XSL and then a colon a lot, and because of the fact that we already need to use a ampersand LT in order to get the less than symbol as a parsable character. I mean, you could use the Unicode number as well, but most people don't do that. So if we go an entity, just like this, and we'll just call that X. Generally, this isn't considered good practice, but oh, doesn't really matter. And inside of that, we want to pass the less than character, so LT, followed by XSL and then a colon. So it'll end up looking like this. So, because we're going to be using that at essentially the start of every single tag. So, may as well make it something nice and short. So, we'll put in name. So now we can go ampersand, X, and then semicolon. And that'll be filled in with less than symbol XSL, then full colon. And then we're going to type style sheet, just like this. Now, in style sheet, you then have a version, which in our case is going to be 1.0, and then finally, you're also going to need to copy over this text that I described earlier, just like that. This just lets your browser recognize the type of XSL which we're needing to transform, or the type of XSL that we're using in order to transform our XML into HTML. That's exactly what parsing is. So then we're going to end that with greater than symbol, which is a GT. And the description is also required, so we'll add a brief description in here. So this style sheet, all that it does, this will be opening, closing tag, any XML document, just like that. Brilliant. Now I've got a description, and that's in there. I will add some code context later, but for now, that's all that we need. So we're going to save this, and we're going to call this cheat sheet.xml. Can't put a space there. My bad. Okay. Now, this next part is pretty important as well. So we're going to go question mark, and then we need to specify that we're going to link to a style sheet. Now, because I haven't memorized all of this, here's something that I prepared earlier. So if we jump into cheat sheet, you can see on the second line, got XML style sheet and then so on, href type. So we're going to be implementing that in our code as well. So question mark, XML style sheet, type equals, and that will be text/XSL. Now, it's worth noting that these attributes, it doesn't actually matter in what order we put them in. Personally, I like putting the href at the end because it makes it more obvious where it's actually going, and it makes the other attributes more obvious that they belong to that tag. Completely personal preference. So I can go cheat sheet.xslt.xsl and then finish that with a question mark as well. Alright, we're essentially done with our XML for now. Next, we're going to create the XSLT. So, as I said, that begins with XSL, and then style sheet. And then we need to specify the version number, which in this case for saying 1050 is always going to be 1.0, or at least it was when I was learning it. I'd imagine that it's going to be the same. And then we need to throw in that text from earlier, which links over to the W3 site. So that's this one. And you'll notice that because of VS Code and the extensions I've got, autocomplete automatically shows you that you need to close it. So we'll just save this, and we're going to call that cheat sheet, and then instead of .xml, it'll be XSLT. This is just the file name, it doesn't actually matter and then we're going to call that .xsl. Doesn't matter whether it's XSL or XSLT, it does the exact same thing because of the fact that all that an extension does on a file is it just allows for any application to recognize that that file should be of this structure when it interprets it. I could make this a .txt and pass it over. It would not matter. Brilliant. So now that we've got this defined, the next thing that we need to do is we need to actually specify that this is going to be output. So XSL and then output and then method equals HTML, just like that. Now, what this does is it essentially means that everything that's in this XSL document is going to be HTML or it's going to be passed into HTML. So if we start by declaring HTML, just as usual, /HTML. Now that's one thing that's worth noting about XSLT that is different to HTML. Every single time that you have a tag that self-closes, so IMG tags, BR tags, HR tags, any of like this XSL output tag that we defined earlier, that you need to specify that it closes with this /. The reason why is because this is parsing HTML, so it can get a little iffy if you were to add tags that self-close. Sometimes it can throw errors, particularly depends on the version of XSLT. That's part of the reason that you're using the first one. So anyway, we'll keep going. So we'll go head, /head, general stuff that you get in just about every single HTML document, and then we'll put h1, and we'll just say hello world, just to make sure that this is working. And to demonstrate to you that why Chrome won't, or Edge, or whatever other browser you want to use. And we'll go with the title as well. And we'll call this XML and XSLT cheat sheet. Again, you probably don't want your titles to be this long, but this is just a demonstration. Right, so there is one thing missing here, which is the XSL template. So we actually need to, so you would have learned about what an XPath is. We need to actually define what the first match is. So what's the first tag that we're going to start from? In this case, it's going to be the root tag, which is tags. So we need to go XSL template, just like that, then match. So you can see from the extensions I've got installed that it automatically says, hey, it's going to be one of these two attributes. So I can just hit tab to autocomplete that. So it'll state mode equals #default by default, but we don't really need that. Most browsers will automatically correct that anyway. And you'll also notice that it's automatically closed it for me. And we want to put that closing tag right down the end in this case. You can have multiple templates, but you can't have two templates inside of each other. It essentially just states where the root is in your XPath when you provide any local references. So in this case, we want to go tags, just like that. And that should be all for now. So just to show you how this looks, we'll go open, just like this. So you can see there's your files. They're inside of this folder, just like we created. If I open up Brave and chuck that off to the side, close this repo now. Also, another interesting thing about VS, you can actually copy the plain text just by dragging this. So I can drag this file just like this. So I can go XML, throw it in, and you'll see that nothing has happened. And the reason why is because this is in Brave, which is essentially Chrome. So you can enable a flag, which is, I believe it's allow file unique or something like that. It's similar to Firefox. And you would have to run that every single time. I believe that one of the only two ways to do it on Windows is either through, you can press the Windows button with R and then specify the flag there, or you can open it using PowerShell and then specify your flag. But either way, it's just generally not a good idea, and it's quite difficult to do because the point is that it opens up a vulnerability. You don't want that on your main browser, so that's the reason why we installed Firefox. So if I open up Firefox just like this, chuck that off to the side, and as I said, so yeah, we definitely don't want to make it the primary since we've intentionally opened up a vulnerability in this thing. And then you can see we've got this XSL document. If we open that, that's just styling, so it's just going to be the plain text. But if we open the XML document by passing it over here, there you go. Now the HTML is actually being passed. So right now, we're not actually doing anything with the information that's in our XML document. So we're going to want to add a for each in here. So that's XSL for each, just like that. Again, it's automatically filled in with the select. So we are then going to want to select some tag. So in this case, that tag is going to be named tag. So right now, our XPath, once we've gone this match and then this select, it's going to go, okay, bring tags. What's the next one down? Got tags, and then tag. So we're going to be looking here. So now when we use our value ofs, so if we go h3, because we're still writing HTML right now, just like that. Now instead of writing the name of whatever tag we want to pass, we can actually just use a value of, and this is the power of XSLT, because we can go value of like this and then select like that. And then we can specify whatever tag we want, right? So in this case, and I'll just close this as well. In this case, we want to grab the name. So we just call that name, which, come to think of it, is actually bad practice because name is also an attribute. So maybe we should just make a tag name, right? So we'll fix that up. So we can go name, alt enter, back, and then tag name, just like that. Fixed. Brilliant. So now we've got the value of tag and then tag name. And you'll notice that if we add multiple tags in here, like this, every single one of them gets pulled through. And they'll even be unique if we were to change it. So if we just make that a mess, you can see it's going 1, 2, 3. You can also sort and order these, which you'll get into later. But for now, this is just the basics. So I've got tag name, and we also want the description. This, so we can go XSL value of select equals and then description, just like that. Close tag, and there we go. So now, very quickly, I'm just going to add a little bit of styling to this as well. So just like any other HTML, I can still specify link with some CSS. You should already know how to do this from your previous labs. You just need to remember that any self-closing tags need to be specified as closed in valid XSLT. So link rel equals style sheet. Don't want XSL style sheet, we just want style sheet. And then href equals, and we're just going to point to cheat sheet styles. Which we haven't actually made yet, but I'll just throw that together quickly. So go margin 0. Again, this is all personal preference. So every single tag, this is called a wildcard selector. Every single tag in the entire HTML is going to get these CSS attributes assigned to it. So you'll notice that if we save this, let's go cheat sheet, and then I'll just modify the end to styles.css. And then actually fix this so that it uses src rather than href, because that should be working now. Unless I've just made some simple mistake. Also go to a website that has embedded styling, just a moment. Interesting, so apparently that was right the first time. Brilliant, yeah, so it just wasn't refreshing for some reason. So yes, it was href, so that points here. So you can see that every single tag has had the padding assigned to 0. We're going to fix that up a little bit, so we want our h3 tags to get a bit of space around them. h1's need to be pretty big as well. Another thing that I personally like to do is I like to specify the color of text, so RGB 000 for black. Shouldn't be necessary, but just in case there's any browser defaults, this will override them. And the other thing that we're going to want to do is we'll make it a different font, I guess. So font family, and we'll go Korean New. Brilliant. And while we're at it, we'll also go font size and make it all the exact same, which in this case, we will make it 14 point. So that'll also affect all of the headings, which seems like a weird thing to do, but the reason why is because now we can actually update it to whatever we want. So we want to make our H1 40 point. So we can go font size, 40 point. Want to make our H3s a bit smaller, so maybe 28. And then we'll leave our text at 14. And it's looking alright. We'll also add a bit of padding around them, I guess. So padding top, right, bottom, left. So we'll add a bit of padding to the bottom of this, I guess, and maybe to the left as well. So let's go 1.5%. Personally, I like using 1.5% because of the fact that it's relatively small and it's scalable. So no matter what our viewport, height, width, so on, whatever it's scaled within is going to be dynamically changing. So if I was to view this on mobile, the padding would also change. Apply the padding to everything, I guess. This just makes it easier so that if we ever add any images, iframes, whatever, automatically gets fixed up. Because it'll automatically be margin 0, padding 0, so then we can manually change it ourselves, which is a nice thing to do. It gives you much more control. A little too small. Again, you can use M4EML units, but we won't go into that right now. That'll be in a CSS tutorial, I guess, down the line somewhere. There we go. I'd say that's readable enough. Because once it's actually like full width, it's going to look like this, which is good. A bit better. We'll make the background color gray as well, I guess. So again, I like using RGB because it's a little more modern of a specifier. So we can go 10, 10, 10, and that'll be very, very dark. But then, because of VS, just go a bit lighter. Maybe up to 133. Probably go a bit lighter than that again. Again, all personal preferences, you can do whatever you want. I just don't like having bright white screens, personally. This looks awful. You can fix that with a bit of effort, but this is just a demo, so. Right, the last thing we'll add is the code context. So if you've used XSL or XSLT, one of the advantages of the fact that it's a parser is that you can add conditional statements. So let's add some code context to this tag, like this. And then we'll say always use, actually, if we're doing code context, it should probably be actual code. And what we'll do is we'll use the code tag in the HTML. Like this. Good. And now we want to put in some code context. So, quickest way to do this. See, the problem is that if we include greater than and less than signs, then we need to continuously use those. I guess that we can just do this. So just copy the tag name. Right, now I'm just going to modify it so that way every single less than is an LT. In fact, we can use our little and x here, and shortcut. Now you could be clever with this and copy across the text and then use Control F, Control A to be able to edit it in bulk, but since this is only a small amount, I'm fine with doing this by hand. Just indent this a little bit. In fact, this is a good opportunity to demonstrate the formatting. So there you go. So format document. And there we go. So you'll notice that again, code hasn't had any styling added to it. So may as well do that. And we'll make it red. Just like this. So what I'm doing now is I'm just adding a class, just to demonstrate that you can actually do that, since this is really just HTML. So we'll go class equals, and then I want to put code divider. It's looking a little better. Still not too much of a fan of that white space. Also, the red's a little difficult to read, we should probably make it white. Of course, that's not going to matter. So, yeah, XML ignores white spaces, so may as well just throw it all in one line and then format it. Yeah, it's ugly, but it'll have to do. So I'll just throw one more example in and then we'll be done. So, tag name, ignore the rest of this. We'll make this the output. So output will already have the XSLT colon at the start, or XSL colon. And then we're going to go method equals HTML, because that's what we're using in our example. I'll get rid of the code context because it's optional. So when you're in your lab, I'd recommend taking a look at some of the conditional logic that applies to XSLT. You can actually use XSL if to be able to state that if something isn't, if it's empty, for example, like if code context doesn't exist for one of these tags, we'll go into this on the Thursday example, but if it doesn't exist, you can just make the div not appear at all, or you can state an else and state that the code context does not appear for this tag, so, or no context given, or whatever else you want. So anyway, I'll just edit this description quickly. So we'll state there you go. Now you'll notice that because of the fact that our div doesn't have much padding on it and the padding itself is highlighted, I'm going to add a margin to it. So instead of using break lines and instead of using HRs and such, I can just take this and I can go code divider because I only want this to apply to that. So we've got a specifier and then we're going to go margin, just go bottom. We'll make it a fair bit larger, so 4%. So that should be the other way around, like that. Brilliant, now we've got a bit of space. Looks good. So on Thursday, in fact, one more thing. I want to add a bit of padding to the top of that. That doesn't look great. So to do that, I would just take my specifier for the code divider code, and I'm going to go top, and I'll make it 1.5% as well, so it's symmetrical. Interesting. Yeah, so that's not great, obviously. So with the viewport, that just creates it's pretty ugly. So, you know, let's just scrap all of that CSS. We'll just print it inline for now. There we go. So now if we keep adding more tags to this and we'll keep adding descriptions, we'll go through this on Friday. I'm going to upload the code to a GitHub repository, which will be specified on the parsed page. And from there, you should be able to edit this. I'll also teach you how to create a pull request so that way we can edit code more professionally, as you would do in an actual industry, like if you were in an actual workplace or with any kind of club. If you're doing group coding, it's going to be very useful as well. But we'll cover that as well as how to add on to this document and how to write it yourself. Excellent. Well, I'll see you at the next session. And just as a quick demonstration, we'll go git add all git commit. We'll call this commit added first notes and CSS, and then we'll push it. So this way, once you do navigate into Git and you navigate, this is completely public. You can access it from any device you want. You can access it from that link. And you can see all of the code that we've written. It's also very easy to download, but I'll show you that on Thursday if you run into any issues with it. Brilliant. Well, I'll see you then.